Hey, we are live, and I see you've lit your wrestling tree in honor of tonight's show, Kevin.
A wrestling tree. It's the special Tuesday night wrestling tree, a special night and time. So, a celebration for those who are joining us live after NXT and making us part of your wrestling viewing on a Tuesday night. Doug, it just didn't work out schedule wise for us to get together on Sundays. So, um, we can't pass up the opportunity to have this topic tonight because it's one that we um, obviously loved a fantasy book, and that is what we're going to do tonight because our main event topic is the Elite in WWE, something that was very close to actually happening.
So close, just a vote away, apparently.
We're going to talk a little bit about the situation as far as what the details of their signings are, whether or not we thought it's a good decision for the Elite, whether or not we thought it was a good decision for Tony Khan, and then that's when we get into the juicy part of fantasy booking. We're going to look at each member of the Elite and decide whether or not they would have succeeded in WWE land, as well as looking at some dream matches that, daggone it, Doug, at least for right now, we're probably not going to get to see.
Yeah, maybe we'll see some Jade Cargill in WWE soon.
I like your way of segueing, Doug. We have a lot of news to get into this week. So, what do you say? Let's
Let's hit that opening bell, Kevin.
opening bell time. So there's so much news, and we do have a show on our regular day and time on Sunday. We're going to table some of those
Nice.
things and those
Yeah.
news items until Sunday because we have to talk about the biggest news in wrestling, not just over the last week and a half, as it were, but really one of the biggest stories in the history of wrestling, and that is the sale of WWE, which we have talked about and been looking at for a while now, is official. It is now joined with UFC under the banner of TKO Holdings. The deal was finalized a week ago today. Make no mistake about it, Vince McMahon is still large and in charge at WWE. It's funny, I saw quite a few clickbait headlines that made it sound like it was such an end of an era that Vince was
Right.
somehow like, dead and in his grave, if
No
much
such
less not
thing.
still in charge.
Right.
We've seen him rise from the dead before. If they say he's dead, I'm still not going to believe that.
No, This man will live forever. He's like Keith Richards. Vince McMahon, Keith Richards, and cockroaches is going to be all that's left of humanity one day.
But I mean, Endeavor CEO Ari Emanuel did make it very clear that the wrestling operations are still going to be handled by Vince McMahon. He doesn't see it as broken. He doesn't know the business. And so he's very content, which makes sense to let the wrestling guy
Sure.
run the wrestling business. But despite the fact that some people had the hyperbole of like, oh, it's Vince being out, it really is an end of an era. It's a significant shift, no matter how you look at it in the wrestling business, because last Tuesday marked the first time in 41 years that the buck didn't stop with Vince McMahon. Ever since he bought the company from his father back in the early 80s, it's been 41 years of whatever Vince wanted was the bottom line.
Right.
And Doug, it's a historic time in wrestling that, we've been knowing it's coming for a while, but it still feels a little strange to watch a product where, Vince doesn't have the final say if things were pushed come to shove.
Yeah, but I think we can see that Vince does still have very much a hand in the booking.
No, man, that's Triple H. He's the head of creative.
Yeah, I'm sure Triple H said, "What would be great for women's wrestling on Monday nights? Oh, I know. Let's bring back Nia Jax. She's a good worker. Let's bring her back." Yeah,
We have seen a lot of change over the last week. Some of it business as usual, and some of it related to the fact that wrestling landscape is now under TKO Holdings. That they were all on hand at the New York Stock Exchange to ring the bell. And one of the things we've talked about, Doug, is that it wasn't going to be all rosy, and we have to be concerned about layoffs and how soon after the
wow.
merger would take place that would get those layoffs. Doug, that answer was what, 48 hours?
And what a really cutthroat, kind of like cold thing to do. Everybody work from home on Friday because some of you are just never coming back to the office, and we're going to cut all your ties while you're gone. Very cold. What, 100 people let
Yeah.
go?
More than 100 on Friday. I know that we on the show had been talking about, what talents are worried, and to be clear, no talents were touched. In fact,
Yes.
the most well-known of the individuals who were let go was Dana Warrior, the widow of Ultimate Warrior, who was working for WWE in the capacity of community outreach. But breaking down those more than 100 layoffs, PW Insider is reporting that the WWE Insight and Analytics team was cut from at least 20 employees down to 3, and that areas such as marketing, graphic design, live event department were also heavily impacted. They announced after the layoffs that they would have a staff meeting, and that call did occur. Vince McMahon spoke, as did Ari Emanuel, the new CEO of TKO Holdings. Nick Khan spoke as well, or he was there. Obviously, we don't know the details other than those who attended reported it was mostly a real rah-rah session about how great this merger is going to be, and how,
Right.
despite the, growing pains of 100 people being sent home, that the future was going to be very, very bright post-merger. Doug, I can't imagine that, even though this affected office staff, which we kind of predicted
Right.
that, that's where the duplication is going to be between what UFC has and what WWE has. Some
Mhm.
very long-serving and long-term behind-the-scenes employees were victims of all this. If you were a talent in the locker room, would you necessarily believe that you're safe? Obviously, they're not going to replace you with a UFC fighter. It's not like there's duplication there, but
Or
it
or
doesn't
or
get
is
this
there?
off to.
I mean,
Well,
there that I think is not immediate, but I do think, and we could probably do a show on this. That is a possibility for the future. I can see some wacky drafts happening in the future across brands, and I'm not talking about SmackDown, Raw. I'm talking WWE, UFC, kind of like draft things happening. But again, that's topic for another show. As far
yeah,
as talents that should be concerned, I would be looking at how I've been used recently and how much money I make because, like you say, those, and you're right, it's a redundancy of services. They're going to look across and say, okay, we have this and this. We don't need both of these marketing teams. One team can do, you know, things for both these organizations. But same thing, not necessarily redundancy services at that point, but when you're letting those senior people are being let go because they have the largest paychecks, they have the largest
yeah.
you know income coming in. They're being paid out a lot more than somebody who can do their job for maybe a quarter as much as what they've garnered over their years there. So I get that. So again, if I'm talent right now, how much am I really being used and how much do I make? Can I make it as enhancement talent and hold on? Or, that push I hope for is never coming. So am I good making my like 80, 90 grand, touring with a guaranteed downside or downside guarantee? Or am I going to get cut loose? I think that's where we got to be thinking right now.
Doug, you either really understand the wrestling business or you've worked in the corporate world before. I'm not,
let
not
me just
analyzing your analysis here.
let me say this mic wasn't bought with wrestling money.
It's a fact of life. What might be good for the company and what might be profitable for the shareholders. There is pain oftentimes once we see these two merging of companies who might have those type of redundancies. That's what we witnessed on Friday. There is no indication that was going to be the one and only cut. It could be just the first cut, but time will tell. You mentioned high level individuals with those larger contracts. It's a great segue because a few things we also know post merger is that we have a brand new board of TKO, and it's comprised of 11 people from Endeavor and WWE, either employees or the choice of those two organizations. That includes Ari Emanuel, Vince, Nick Khan. Who it doesn't contain, though, is Triple H, who, though remaining head of creative, it's the first time since Trips joined the board in 2015 that he finds himself on the other side of the boardroom door. And someone else we know who it doesn't contain was the first apparent casualty of the merger, even before we started learning about the layoffs on Friday. And while those layoffs on Friday were expected, much of our pink slip focus has been either on the rank and file or talent. Not the C suite, but Chief Financial Officer and Chief Administrative Officer Frank Riddick III is leaving WWE at the end of September. He had been on the board of directors for more than a decade, served as interim CFO back in 2020, took over the position full time a year later. Doug, that's obviously a big salary. And again, you're
Mhm.
looking at VP level individuals in that C suite. Might not be the first to not, of course, get publicly fired, but to just, I'm moving on for my future endeavors, right?
Yeah, yeah. I think you're right. We're going to say again, but you're. I think you're looking at redundancy of services even at that level with certain
Of course.
individuals. You know,
Yeah.
do you need a VP of talent for UFC and WWE now? Do you need that? Sure, they're two. One's what both combat sports, one scripted, one not. I'll let the audience decide which one's which there. But
I mean, a
it,
CFO, a guy who's looking at the money like this, I mean, the money's going to spend the same whether it's a legit fight or a pre-scripted fight. So I don't
exactly.
see this position being filled. In other words,
Exactly. I mean, you're going to start looking at maybe like some sort of enterprise system where you have a uh, a VP of all talent, across a VP
yeah,
of talent, a VP of marketing, and so
yeah.
on across the entire board instead of UFC, WWE. No, it's TKO. VP of talent, VP of marketing. And the teams that work underneath them.
I have a feeling this is not the first of these stories we'll be having in our opening bell segment.
Yeah, and you know what? We should probably talk more about some wrestling because we are getting way too deep into the corporate world right now.
Yeah, Doug, this involves a wrestler, this next story, but it doesn't involve him actually wrestling. In fact, Matt Riddle has been noticeably
Oh
absent from
yeah,
from
yeah.
Raw the last 2 weeks. Turns out it's not necessarily punishment, but rather he supposedly has an ongoing illness, an ear
Oh,
infection to be precise, that may take weeks to clear up. But it's not Riddle's ears that caught headlines over this past weeks, but rather an incident involving Riddle at JFK Airport following WWE's return from India. Riddle got in a little bit of a situation with authorities, Doug.
a situation which he was very verbal about, at least on social media,
It made it
after.
worse.
And yeah, really, something done
I
on
know.
social media
Made things
made
worse.
made a situation worse. How is this
You're
even
right.
possible?
That probably shouldn't even be news. That
Right,
social media
exactly.
made things worse. But the facts we know is that during the time at JFK Airport, the Port Authority received a report on a disorderly person, or rather, I should say, a disorderly bro. Uh, Riddle later went on social media and accused the police officer of sexually assaulting him at the airport. And he shared a photo of the officer who he said had allegedly abused him. So, for its part, the Port Authority said that they are looking into the incident and that Riddle was definitely exhibiting disorderly behavior, if you can imagine,
What's that? Whoa.
both before and in the aftermath of the alleged incident. Now there's an internal investigation. The police are involved. The Port Authority of Police, I should say. There has been no official police report filed. WWE has not made any public comment, at least as tonight when we're recording this show. Doug, I don't know what to make of this other than regardless of what happened, it's odd even by Matt Riddle's standards, but it's not the first odd situation and or scandal that the original bro has found himself involved in.
Man, he's an interesting dude. Let's just say that.
And when authorities say they found him like disorderly and incoherent, I don't know. Are you in your mind just picturing like one of his normal Monday Night Raw promos, and they're just not understanding him?
I'm thinking, no, dude, that's just him.
Yeah, I don't think it was anything other than just a normal old Saturday for the original
Right?
show. But more on that as we know it. One more WWE land story, and we'll get to some AEW story, but this one is related to Vince And it's just a health update on Vince because he is now back from medical leave and the spinal surgery that had put him out of commission there for a bit. He wasn't in attendance at the very final Raw in which he had total control, but apparently the opportunity to shape the final Raw under total control was too much for the old man.
Sure
And
was.
he remoted in and apparently had lots of changes for the
Yeah.
broadcast, even remotely. But I guess he did feel strong. He probably recognizes that it's the end of at least a certain part of an era, and he was going to put his stamp all over that, as you alluded to earlier. That apparently included Nia Jax, but what you going to do?
What you gonna do?
But yeah, welcome back, Vince, from your spinal surgery. You undead French vampire. You.
Have you seen? You probably have the image of everybody at the stock
Oh
exchange.
yes, yeah.
At first, I didn't realize where Vince was in that. I was like, "Wait, that's Vince." It takes a double take. You're like, yeah, okay, that is Vince." But at first glance, it's almost like a Where's Waldo thing. You're like, Vince should be here, shouldn't he? Because there's there and you're, oh, there he is. That's him.
Vince has always been a fairly distinct looking individual, but for all the years we got used to the presence of Vince McMahon on our TV screens, it barely resembles the man we see today, who every time he is captured in a photograph looks just stranger and stranger. I don't mean to remark on someone's appearance as they age, but I don't know what's going on with him.
I'm not sure he's aging anymore. I'm not sure what's going on there. I mean, he's. But we know he's not a French vampire, as I've alluded to before, because he can be captured on film. So there's that.
Valid point. Doug, what do you say we get into some AEW?
Well, let's
news?
do it.
So AEW may be coming to Max very soon. And that's according to a report from comicbook.com, who let the world be known that there is an apparent deal that is imminent between AEW and Warner Brothers Discovery, currently in the works. Obviously, Warner Brothers Discovery is the owners of TBS and TNT, the current cable home of AEW, which, of course, it's about renewal time, and we knew Tony was trying to swing some big things, but apparently this Max deal could happen very, very soon. And while nothing has been announced, we are hearing that it could be everything from next day airing of shows such as Dynamite and Rampage and Collision, but it also could mean that they could go the WWE route like they did with Peacock and move their premium live events to the streaming platform. One thing that this might mean, Doug, is more AEW, and this report included the fact that they may be looking to move to 12 pay-per-views a year as opposed to their 4 or 5 that they do now, which would definitely put them in that WWE range. I know we like the idea of a subscription to cover these pay-per-view costs and things, but do you, on the creative side, do you like the idea that you might go from 5 shows you're building to 12?
You know, I am an AEW mark. For those of you, this is your first time tuning in, I am. And I have to say, though, some of these AEW pay-per-views are just too long. If we're getting 12 a year, maybe we can get more concise, more trimmed down, focused pay-per-views instead of having 48 matches on a card that starts on a Tuesday and doesn't end till, like, you know, the Saturday after that.
That's true.
Again, I do love AEW, and I'll sit there and watch every one of those matches. But you
It
know,
can be numbing.
yes, it especially when you have to work the next day. That's rough. I mean, I don't sleep a lot as it is, but
It's because of all the wrestling that's on, but
right.
you might have more pay-per-views, but you're right. They could make them shorter. There's obviously give and take to it, and nothing set in stone. We will follow this story, though, because this will definitely be big for AEW's business and for AEW fans or wrestling fans in general who maybe don't pony up the $50-$60, whatever it is for the pay-per-view. So.
Because everything I read says, you know, they're going towards a basically a monthly model anyway, very similar to WWE. And I would much rather that be on a Max, you know, or some other subscription service like Peacock, because, you know, first the network, then Peacock, great for pay-per-views or premium live events. But, you know, AEW $50 per event, especially when you have them back to back, like all in, all out.
Too much.
Too much to ask for your fans. When you're not the top dog in the industry, and even the
And
top
that's
dog in the industry does not ask for that anymore.
no, it doesn't. And so that sort of sets the tone for the market. So I think it'd be a wise decision for AEW and would gain them fans, because that's what fans now expect to pay for premium live events. That's what they're
Absolutely.
worth to
Yeah.
them. So, yeah, we'll continue to follow this, obviously make you aware of any changes before they happen. As I mentioned at the start of our show, though, there's so much news that we're going to table some of it until our show on Sunday. So be sure to join us then, where we talk about the coming and goings and the possible whereabouts of everyone from Jade Cargill to Edge to CM Punk. Yes, even CM Punk. There is a lot of talk about the futures of these individuals, as well as more news. I'll end our new segment, though, by just quickly saying congratulations to former WWE diva Kelly Kelly. Real name Barbie Blank, which I never understood why they bothered to change it.
Why
When your
did they
name's
change?
Barbie.
Yeah, why? It's right there.
She gave birth to twins last week, so she'd been very open and public about her and her husband's prior miscarriage and trying and things. So congratulations to the happy couple and to Kelly Kelly. So with that, Doug, what do you say? Let's transition into our main event topic.
Let's do it. Let's talk. What did you call them? Worldwide Elite. I like that.
World, yeah. Yeah, WWE could have been World Wrestling Elite. It was very close.
That's it. Yeah.
Obviously, just a quick recap: the Elite, surprise, did make their decision to stay with Tony Khan. Something we reported on a lot here on the Two Bros Wrestling Show, but it wasn't necessarily the foregone conclusion that a lot of critics thought it would be. Like, of course, they're going to sign with AEW. The more we learn about the situation, the more we learn that it was really close this past summer and not a foregone conclusion that they were Elite for life as executive vice presidents. Sources close to the foursome said that it went back and forth and no decision would be made unless all were unanimous. It took a number of votes for it to be unanimous,
right?
Which means that at any given point, there were several folks either undecided or holding out for WWE, Doug.
I just realized there's a bit on being the Elite that is probably related to this voting. I'm gonna have to go back and watch all the most recent episodes of Being the Elite, because there's been a running bit about them making big money, and anyway, if you've watched Being the Elite, you know what I'm talking about. But
maybe money it is.
Yeah,
I mean. Supposedly they were those that were not already in the millions are now in the millions. So these are multi-million-dollar contracts that ties these guys up with AEW for at least the next 4 years. And reports are that it was not unanimous, and it took multiple votes to get it unanimous, and that they were very, very close to accepting WWE's offer before Tony Khan came in and made a ridiculous offer they couldn't refuse, which obviously that's what smart business, right? You just make the best deal for yourself, because reportedly this was less about creative control. We've seen Cody get out of the business side of things and be happy back, at least, seemingly happy back in WWE. But in this situation, supposedly all four men were just looking to solidify the financial futures of their families. So whatever was the best deal they could get, they would have been willing to go and just been soldiers for Vince McMahon, as opposed to executive vice presidents for Tony Khan.
Yeah, because what I've read is like their first AEW deals that kicked off AEW and put them on this path with All Elite was enough to secure their futures, and this next deal, it secures their family's futures going forward. So these guys are all set now, all set with this deal. So the first one was for them, establish themselves and make themselves comfortable in life. This deal makes their families set for life.
Doug, let's start the discussion on asking from Tony Khan and AEW's perspective. Did Tony overpay, or is overpaying and keeping them out of the hands of WWE the smart business move, regardless of what it cost them?
So we've seen Vince McMahon do this in the past. There was a point where Vince just bought all the toys.
Yeah.
So I mean, that ended up in massive, like, future endeavors at one point, but there was a point in time where WWE was doing this and just keeping all the major players off the board. So I think, past practice would indicate that, this is a wrestling decision, a wrestling business decision that is acceptable. As far as overpaying them, I think Kenny Omega's worth anything you're going to throw at him. I'm not sure what the price is that got him to the table. You know, and we can get into the merits of the rest of the elite here in a minute, but Kenny, one of the best wrestlers in the world, probably doesn't have the miles on him that he once had, because it's not the years, it is the miles, and that body has a lot of miles on it because we've seen Kenny through the years abuse it. Same thing with the Bucks and same thing with Hangman too. These guys don't
Yeah, they work
wrestle.
a hard style. It would
They
have been different
Yeah,
for them in
I
WWE.
mean, I think these guys all cut their teeth in Japanese strong style, and when they were in New Japan, I mean, even way back in the day when the Young Bucks were had a brief hiatus from being the Bucks and were working Generation Me when they were in Impact or TNA at the time, they didn't really slow down. So I don't think any of these guys have a lot of years in ring left, but I think Kenny's worth everything you're going to pay for him
So
still.
here's my take on the business side of it. To me, and I don't mean to again do the Triple H thing and cast aspersions on AEW
Sure.
as the secondary promotion,
Right,
but they
right,
are, as
right.
we've discussed. So to me, the Elite would have been a nice to have for WWE, but a must have for AEW, and I think Tony knew it. After Cody
After Cody.
went back and became a bigger star than ever. Punk, of course, being Punk, and now maybe arguably Tony's biggest star, having to be shown the door. Losing the foursome that was the Elite, the old school OGs, to watch them go up to Vince land and play in that sandbox, I think would have been a lot for a secondary promotion to overcome. Not that they wouldn't have. This wouldn't have been the death of AEW. I'm not trying to over dramatize. I just think that for Vince McMahon, it would be, hey, this would be fun to have. For Tony Khan, it was whatever it costs, I have to lock these guys up because this could really hurt me.
Losing all of your founding fathers of your promotion to your biggest competition definitely does not paint a good image. The optics on that are very, very poor. And let's face it, AEW, poor Tony Khan has dealt with very poor optics for the last year.
He has. And to that end, Doug, the money aside, do you think that it was a good business move for Tony to make, as part of the deal, the continuation of these four retaining their VP positions? Is that a good thing for AEW?
I don't think that this EVP status actually bothers anybody but CM Punk. I may be completely wrong about that, but it seems that Punk is the one who's always hung up on that, or was
That was
always hung
actually
up
the
on.
note I had about this, is that I think that it actually could have been more of an issue had Punk not shown himself the door. Uh,
Yeah.
with them staying around and locked up for years and having this constant tension between
Mm-hmm.
shows, backstage at pay-per-views, I think it would have been much harder to have these guys as VPs with CM Punk and his big mouth around. But with him gone, I don't know that it seems that much of an issue. To your point, I don't know that anyone else has an issue with it, or that they seem to be able to get along with just about anybody except the one person who's no longer there.
Right. I mean, I think there's always going to be a certain contingency within any company where there's like this perceived favoritism, or because I'm sure like Jungle Boy's looked at as one of the Elite's boys. Cabana, there's a huge list we could talk about, but then we also have the guys who are Punk's boys. And I just don't think it was as big of an issue as it was made out to be. I may be completely wrong. Anybody in the AEW locker room who watches the show, because I know you're out there, I'd love to hear your comments about it. Maybe we're wrong.
Yeah, definitely let us know what you think about the Elite as executive vice presidents. We've spent a lot of time over the last year examining the fallout of the original brawl backstage. And of course, most of that here recently has been on CM Punk and his continued bad behavior and actions. But we were pretty clear at the time that of the event, despite the fact that CM Punk aired things in an extremely unprofessional way, that the fight itself and everything that broke down afterwards was not entirely on him.
Right.
The elite definitely had. There were definitely points that could be made where they were too in the wrong. Uh, I've worked for many of an executive before who maybe hasn't agreed with me or the decisions going on. It doesn't give them a right to bite me. Many of the backstage shenanigans that resulted from that. So yeah, we definitely were right to question their behavior as executive VPs. I imagine that Punk or no Punk, that whole incident probably has them on better behavior with these positions moving forward.
Yeah, because there's a tremendous amount of corporate liability when your EVP is swinging punches. Yeah,
Yeah.
and or when you bite one of your EVPs.
So, corporate side aside, business thing aside, we know the Elite or AEW, at least for the next 4 years, very likely longer than that, or at least until their retirements, because as you mentioned, a lot of miles on these bodies. So let's play fantasy booker here,
Let's
Doug. We're
do
going
it.
to look at each member of the Elite, see how we think they would have done had they moved to WWE. I don't believe it would have been equal footing for each of
No,
the four members. I will just say that right off the bat.
not
I
at all.
think it was said that WWE really, really was interested in Omega more
Yeah,
than the others. So I think it's just a natural spot to talk about him, as he's probably the easiest to talk about how Omega would have fit in with WWE in the dream matches we won't see since that didn't occur. But I think that Kenny Omega would have fared the best of the bunch, and not just because we know that they wanted him, but as you mentioned, he's by any measure, by most critics' measure, one of the best wrestlers in the world, especially for the last decade. I think he would have brought. I think he would have gone straight to the main roster as a star in major programs. There wasn't any developmental or
right.
anything
Oh, yeah.
for Kenny Omega, especially considering his age. I think they would have wanted to maximize as much time as they could get out of him, and he
Mhm.
would have gone right to the top.
Absolutely.
Working against him, though, would have been his age, just knowing that, what we've learned from LA Knight recently, that his push has been very long in coming because Vince and others backstage felt that he was too old. For the
Mhm.
record, Knight is 40. Kenny Omega is 39.
Yeah,
So, Doug, do you think that age thing would have made his run in WWE maybe burn hot but burn fast? It's kind of an abbreviated Batista kind of situation where Batista, we saw him a star in his older age and before too very long was gone.
absolutely. Because there is that ageism that does exist there, even though WWE has a hard time making new talent and creating new talent and pushing new talent. They bring in Kenny. Kenny burns hard, burns fast, burns very, very bright. Maybe takes a world championship, not necessarily from the tribal chief, but gets
Yeah.
a world championship, and then just as quick as it comes, it's gone, and then Kenny moves to a more like Nakamura type of action where we have seen what Shinsuke can do. We've seen what Shinsuke and AJ can do, but we haven't really seen that in WWE. And I think after Kenny burns hot and bright for a brief period of time, he kind of fades into maybe even a producer role, but fades out in goes quietly into the night, which doesn't really seem like a Kenny Omega thing to do, to go quietly into the night. But
Yeah. Well, I think he would have been worked into major programs right away. I
mhm,
don't believe he would have had many years featured on the top of the WWE card. I think because of the schedule,
mhm,
that his shelf life in AEW now is going to be longer than it
yeah,
would have been had he gone to WWE. So, from that regard, we might get a longer career out of Kenny Omega than we would have had he gone to WWE, wrestling on the road, wrestling a couple times a week, pay per views, to the world travel and things that are not as big a concern for um, before AEW, quite honestly. And I agree with what you said earlier. I do think he would have been a world champion. within those years of his WWE contract. I think they would have pulled that trigger at some point.
With
Again,
that
not
V trigger.
yeah. Hey, I didn't intend for that. Dream matches, Doug. There's some that are just obvious. I think there's an entire feud that could be had for the entire elite on opposing sides of like a Cody Rhodes and an almost an invasion style storyline. Other dream matches that we could have seen that we won't will be like Omega and Rollins. Can you imagine
It's
the chemistry?
exactly what I was thinking. Omega
That's exactly the
Rollins.
feud I would put him in.
Yes.
Why he still had those good years left is that I do believe that they would have great chemistry and instant classic matches. I'm not sure how he'd match up with Roman, to be honest, but it's definitely
Yeah.
something we never have seen or thought we would have seen. So in that regard, you could still call that a dream match.
Yeah, it would absolutely be a dream match, but I don't know. I have my I have problems wrapping my head around that because I do think you insert Kenny Omega into WWE, he becomes a champion quickly, and the way to do that is, right
Yeah.
now is go for Rollins
Yeah.
because
Absolutely.
you don't go for Reigns. That has to be something very, very special. And I am not by any means saying Kenny Omega is not something special, but that has to be something internally within WWE that they grow, or they just bring in his cousin who's, out of work because of a writer's strike to, do something. But
We might get around to that here in a little bit. Speaking of getting around to things, you mentioned earlier about like the Shinsuke and AJ matchups, but not the ones we've seen
right,
in other
right, man.
promotions. I know I went dream matches because I do think that because of Omega's status, that the world champs would be instant ones. Cody Rhodes will be an instant one. These might not be dream matches because they have been seen before, but they haven't been seen by large audiences. We could really revisit for a larger American audience things like Omega Shinsuke,
Mm-hmm.
Omega Finn Balor,
Yes,
Omega AJ Styles.
yes,
These would be all welcome matches, even if they may not stack up to the stuff that they have done in their younger years on the other side of the world. It's still, as we saw with CM Punk and Samoa Joe, when you take a couple of old dogs that know each other really well, they can still put on a heck of a contest. And
absolutely,
many
absolutely.
American fans, quite honestly, have not seen those matches the way that the hardcore
Right.
fans that
Yeah,
watch everything have.
absolutely. I mean, you put Kenny in the ring. Kenny's like Brian Danielson, Daniel Bryan, however you want to remember him, or you call him out now. Yeah, put him in me in the ring with him. You're going to get like at least a 4-star match.
Yeah.
I
I
mean,
remember your all's match in All Japan. I mean, I gave it
exactly.
3.5, and you did nothing
I
to
did
add to
nothing.
it at
It was
all.
like Kenny wrestling a broom, which
Oh,
he could
Kenny
do.
is. Well, honestly, yes, he could.
Actually, I've seen him.
I
No, that wasn't a broom. Never mind.
I think moving on to the Young Bucks that they are kind of in a similar position in that they are so good that they could get good matches out of folks that other people could not get good matches out of. I think that there are some folks who would think the Bucks wouldn't succeed in WWE only because WWE doesn't value tag team wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think while I think they're better off in staying with AEW for that very reason, I do think they would have been successful in WWE. I think they would have brought WWE's tag division up a level by just being included. At 38 and 34, I don't think that age would have been as much of a factor because, for a tag team, average that out and half the work. And I think there would have been a way around it that would have made them have a longer shelf life than maybe Kenny would have had. But
Yeah.
I think that the WWE knew what to do with the Hardys back in the day, and this would be the closest thing they have style-wise to a prime era Hardy Boys. And I think that they would know what to do with them. I think that they might not have had the level of competition to work with in WWE. That the Jacksons would also start on the main roster.
Yeah.
I don't think they would waste any of those years by starting them anywhere else but the main roster. But the obvious dream match here, I mean, come on, right? Brothers versus brothers.
Yeah. Yeah. We got to get, yeah, that would be great. But, we have some problems with that right now.
Hey, obviously, there have been time over the length of a contract to, make those switch arounds that would have got the Usos back together. But with the Usos' ability to work and the Young Bucks' ability to work, something we haven't seen. I would think that, to me, that's the obvious dream match for the Bucks. Don't you think?
Absolutely. And besides that, you have I think you're get a really great match out of four really good friends where you can have, KO and Sammy, bumping heads with the Bucks. That would be excellent too. But yeah, I think the dream match is the Usos there because I'm trying to think on the cards right now who I'm not even sure I can name four tag teams in WWE right now. I mean, I'm hard pressed to do it because I mean, you've got the not War Machine. What are the Viking
Viking
Raiders?
Raiders,
Viking Raiders, which
the War Viking Experience, as
the
that
War
calls.
Viking. Old man yells at clouds. Yes, the War Viking experience.
Yeah, there definitely isn't as
you
much
know,
for them to work with on WWE, but I do think that in an era like the '90s, where we saw a tag team renaissance in WWE because of the talent on hand, that the Bucks are the kind of talents that could have raised some
yeah,
folks up. I'm looking at NXT, which actually has a ridiculously deep tag team roster. I think folks like the Creed brothers being called up would have made a great opponents for the Bucks. I think a team that recently got called up but that had their push very shortened because of
right.
injury. I mean, visually, look at what the
Yeah,
Young Bucks opposing Pretty Deadly would look
Deadly.
like.
Yeah.
It looks good, right in just in my mind, much less on
Uh-huh.
paper. And I think that Judgment Day would have been a great a feud for them. There's obviously some Finn Balor history they could have played off of with his faction.
Absolutely.
I think that'd been fun as well. So I think that they would have been given a run with the tag titles. Why wouldn't you give the Bucks your tag championships if you have them on the roster?
Absolutely. I think the Bucks would have also, like Kenny, would get a title fairly quickly. I just, long term with the Bucks, kind of like Kenny, but for a different situation because I think Kenny burns fast, burns bright. Same thing with the Bucks, but they burn fast, they burn bright because after a little while, WWE is going to lose interest in the tag team and have some giant come in and squash half the division or something ridiculous like that and totally devalue the entire division and championship that they have anyway. Because again, I'm just looking at past practice here.
And I can foresee in this fantasy booking we're doing a Kenny Omega taking on a Cody Rhodes sort of attitude and rolling with what he's given. I
Yeah,
can see when the Bucks would reach that end of the line that we know would be there when they've beaten everybody and there's no one left for them to feud with. I could see their run ending sort of like a Dudley's run or something where
sure.
creatively they're stifled and not
Yeah.
taken quite as seriously and become gatekeepers or squashed in ridiculous
Hmm.
handicap matches or something like that. So I think they also made the right decision to stay. I think they would have been successful, but maybe just a notch below what Kenny would have done. Which leaves us with one, Doug, and I've saved him to last because I think he's the outlier. I think it's
I
an
agree.
interesting case. He's only 32. And you think that because of that, he would have the highest ceiling with WWE and the longest possible career with WWE. Both those things are true, but I honestly think he would have fared worse than the rest of the elite in WWE land.
I think Hangman, there is a perceived lesser value in Hangman Adam Page than there is in the Bucks or the cleaner Kenny Omega.
Why do you
And
think that is?
correct me if I'm wrong here, but Hangman isn't even a EVP, is he? He wasn't an
Actually,
addition.
no, I don't
Yeah.
believe he is.
So, because Cody was an EVP, the Bucks and Kenny were EVPs. Now the Bucks and Kenny are EVPs, but I still do not think that Hangman is an EVP. Hangman just has a very good deal. So I think maybe that perception is there even within AEW that there's lesser value in Hangman. I think Hangman is a great talent, and when he goes, he can really go.
Do you think that the issue with Hangman, and this is it for me, is not anything to do with his talent in ring or the type of person he is behind the scenes? It's just the fact that he doesn't have the experience. He hasn't wrestled all over the world. He's not a known name. He's not a recognizable name to anyone who hasn't learned him in AEW, or if you were those diehards.
Right.
If you're seeing me, like I saw Hangman in front of like 300 people at an ROH show or
Right.
something
Right.
like,
Right.
I mean, Page, I'm sorry, not Page, but Omega and the Bucks have wrestled in front of WrestleMania-sized crowds for the last 10 years now. Wherever they've
Mhm.
gone, they've been stars. Hangman, you don't bring him in right away and presume that the WWE universe knows who he is. You can probably get away with that with Kenny Omega. They may
Absolutely.
not be able to get away with that with Hangman. I think he actually had the best, unless they decided to bring in the Elite as a group, which I argue they definitely should have done. But if they had decided
Absolutely.
not to do that, Hangman is the only one of these four that I can see Vince going, let's start him in developmental. Let's give him a run at NXT before bringing him up to the main roster. And that's ridiculous to even think about for any of the other three.
Yeah, I mean, really, I think it's ridiculous to think of Hangman like that because I do see value in Hangman, but I don't think I just think there's that perceived lesser value in Hangman in general, and maybe it is the experience. Like maybe you do nail it down there because I mean, Hangman, he's Bullet Club,
Yeah.
he is a member of the elite. Oh,
But he hasn't headlined a Wrestle Kingdom. He hasn't headlined
right,
in
right.
Mexico City for AAA. He just doesn't have the track record that the others have. And I think that there's a reason that he was the only one that wasn't already in the millions in
Hmm.
AEW land. And I think that would have followed him along with Vince. I think Vince would have got that would have been a toy Vince would have gobbled up. Maybe ended up putting him in NXT. And I do think that in NXT, Shawn Michaels, he would definitely know what to do with a Hangman Page.
Oh
I think he
yeah.
would have pushed him to the moon in NXT. I think he would have had the NXT title or the North American title relatively quickly. But on the main
Hmm.
roster, I don't see WWE ever having Adam as a WWE main eventer. Do you see
Hmm.
him headlining WrestleMania against Roman Reigns? I mean, I could be wrong, but I just don't see it fairly or unfairly. I just think that he would have been hit that upper mid card glass ceiling.
Hangman, a relative unknown to the majority of the WWE universe, right? So you have to do a lot of building, just like Cody. I get why, and I'm happy with the decisions that were made with Cody not to take that belt off of Roman at WrestleMania because Cody has a lot to establish and get over. We've talked about this before how he's defeated the beast. He's checking off boxes now. Yeah, an injury, a very unfortunate injury took him out of finishing his story for a while, which led to him getting clogged up in things and not being able to establish what he needed to establish as a character, even though he's the returning Cody Rhodes. Hangman, who is this guy? The
Yeah.
majority of WWE, who is this guy? These other people I kind of know, I've heard the names, but who is this, and what is a hangman? What is a millennial cowboy? I mean, would he have even had this angsty millennial cowboy angle? Then would he be Hangman Adam Page?
Honestly,
Would they
Triple H
rename
might have
him?
Triple H, completely in charge of creative, may have known what to do with that character.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure that in the new corporate environment of multiple cooks in the kitchen and shareholders to answer to and other corporate bosses, that they would have taken any chances with Hangman and would have gone with the established names and not added a big contract and pushed him to the moon that would have got him that big contract. I just don't see it happening.
Hmm.
But I mean, there are dream matches still there. Let's talk of the positive. If things would have worked out for Adam, and I think he would have had a decent career in WWE, just not at the same level that he has ahead of him in AEW. But
Yeah.
at NXT, if they would have started him there, great matches with Carmelo Hayes, Braun
Yeah.
Breaker, obvious one. On the main roster, in addition to what I said earlier, I think it might be secondary to Omega versus Rhodes, but I think the history there would lead at some point to Hangman Rhodes storyline. Maybe not as marquee again as Omega with Cody, but still. The ones I would like to see is the hard hitting stuff. I think a Hangman as a guy who can wrestle, but also can brawl with the best of them. The
Yeah.
chemistry I think he would have with Gunther or a Drew
Oh.
McIntyre, Sheamus type.
Oh, I hadn't even thought about that. I was thinking more of that like, that underlicked high flying stuff because I'd love to see him with Ricochet, but my goodness, I hadn't even
Oh
thought
yeah,
about him with Gunther. Oh my goodness. I got
and
the goose pimples with that one.
exactly right. I mean, we agree. I believe that it's good for the four men involved that they stayed with AEW, but it doesn't
Absolutely.
mean that as wrestling fans that we can't see that there are some things on the other side of that fence that would have been really interesting that we may never now get to see. But watching Gunther give uppercuts and Adam Page respond with a lariat, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
again, like you, goosebumps. Like I think
Yeah.
they would have been great in the ring together. Who knows? Hangman's young enough that we could still see it.
Yeah, if Hangman were to establish himself and be built up in AEW to the point where, yeah, I mean, he's been to the top of that AEW mountain briefly, but he's been there,
Yeah, yeah,
and he's in a lot of really good things with the Elite, and I'm so glad that the Elite is back together as a unit with the four of them
yeah.
for the time being, anyway. But Hangman could be so much more than I think he is perceived to be. You know, I feel bad because I think a lot of times Hangman is looked at as like that, fourth wheel
Yeah.
there, which I think if anybody was that, it was honestly Cody, but that's,
Well,
just,
here we
just,
go.
just hit the archives for that if you want to hear me
Tell the
rant about.
affiliates we're running long. Doug's on his Cody kick.
I won't get on my Cody rant here tonight. This is about the Elite, not the deserters of the Elite, but
There he goes.
here we go.
There he is.
Hi.
Doug,
But
let's wrap a bow on this. I
let's
mean,
do it.
from a business perspective, for AEW, keeping the Elite was a must.
Yes,
For the guys themselves, the money was coming no matter which way they went. They were playing one side against the other, so good for them.
absolutely. Absolutely.
From
Business
the
is business.
from the art side of things, which is something that really is only important to fans, marks, those who comment on wrestling like us on the internet.
Right.
I think that on the art side of things, it's probably, despite the dream matches we're missing out on, it probably was good for the Elite to stay in AEW. You could argue it would have been more interesting to see how they would have fared in WWE, but I think just for the creative side, for the men themselves, that they will be more fulfilled staying where they are and where they've made their names.
I totally agree with that. I think, it would have been interesting for a brief period of time. Let's say they get a 4-year contract with WWE. Within a year and a half, all those stars have burned bright and burned out, except maybe for Hangman. Maybe it could have been the exact opposite for him. Maybe they do send him to NXT. Shawn Michaels knows exactly what to do with him. By the time he gets to the main roster, they don't turn him into Joey the trash compactor guy or whatever, and decide to change his name again before when they call him up, and let the Hangman Adam Page continue on. Maybe it could have turned out best for him by sending him to NXT first, but
It's
these
true.
are these are things we're never going to know, and
We'll
I'm
never
kind of
know.
happy that we're not going to know them because I
Some
think
things are better left not known, because
yeah,
you mentioned it just a second ago when we were ending up here, and that is we have seen others burn bright, right? Folks come in with big fanfare that we thought
mm-hmm.
this guy's going
Here it
to be
is,
pushed
yeah.
straight to the moon, and it just didn't work. Vince loses interest. He changes character. He puts him in a dumb outfit or a
Mm-hmm.
stupid, gives him a stupid name, and next thing you know, the whole thing is off the rails.
Yeah.
So I think it is good, Doug, that we do not know.
Yeah. I'm good not knowing and just fun speculating.
What we do know, Doug, is we're getting close to the time of our end here. So what do you say we hit that big finish?
Let's do it, man. Let's do it.
Let's talk botch of the week. I know we have a show coming up on Sunday, so anything I've seen in the last couple of days, I'm going to save for our Sunday show. I'm sort of looking at last week. For me, maybe this is kind of a no-brainer, and maybe doesn't even need to be mentioned. But just when I thought it was Nia Jax coming back, we have all these layoffs of individuals, which, though expected, however you look at it, just sucks for the individuals involved, their families. Just the whole corporate and backstage environment that WWE now has moving to this merger, the unease it calls, it just gives everybody an icky feeling as to what that next shoe is going to be to drop. So that's my botch.
So I totally agree with that, but I will go ahead and pick up the ball that you just dropped there. Not that you dropped the ball. Because how bad is it when Stevie Richards is covering all of your botches that you did in a single match when you returned as a very unsafe worker, when he does an entire like YouTube show on you legitimately potentially hurting people, and points out every spot that you screwed up and did not protect your the people in there, and did things that really didn't even make any sense to the story, and calls out not only you but the producers who put together your run in, whatever that was. Because why throw Rodriguez around like that just to have her run back into the ring? Why drop on Rhea Ripley like that and not hold on? I mean, yeah, if you haven't seen the Stevie Richards breakdown of this, go to his YouTube channel and watch him break down. He does really great stuff, like weekly, where he breaks down different wrestling matches, what went right, what went wrong, and he does like an entire spotlight on that. And I mean, this is a really good show. On any given day, but when he starts to breaking it down like this, you can see just how, I don't want to say how unsafe of a worker she is, but I mean, she seems to be pretty unsafe. So yeah, bringing
Yeah.
Nia back,
I mean, I can relate these botches together because what's the look of we're letting 100 people go, but
and
we're
then we
going to
bring
bring
this
back
back.
a talent that no one was clamoring for? The fans don't care for her or her character. She's not popular backstage, and she's not known for, as you point out, the safety of her work. So why is this happening? Is this one last, hey, it's my final night in total control, so I'm going to really rib everybody by bringing back the one person that Triple H didn't deem worthy of bringing back? He brought back everybody else.
And does poor little Kyrie Sane know that? No, did she know this was going to happen? I mean, she was coming back to WWE, right? I mean, she still is, right?
It doesn't make any sense from any standpoint as to why, at her age and a skill level, why we are investing in Nia Jax at this point in time. Makes no sense.
I don't get it. I mean, I don't get it.
Doug, on sunnier sides of things, let's talk performer. Let's talk the things we saw that we liked.
So, being sick and working way too much this past week, especially for being out of work for a couple of days with my illness this week, Doug hasn't watched a lot of wrestling. He's watched a lot of wrestling recap shows, but this is one of those. This is one of those when I acquiesce to you because I don't feel comfortable, calling out things I've not really seen yet. I've just seen highlight reels.
Well, lucky for you, Doug, I've got two. I can give one for you and one for me. How
Excellent.
about that?
Let's do
I
it, brother.
wanted to first call out Gunther for becoming the longest reigning intercontinental champion in history. I don't care how you look at it, or whether you talk about how this is all scripted, it means nothing. It still means something. The fact
It
that you're booked
very much
that
does.
strongly, I can't imagine any time over the last few years me being very high on the Intercontinental title and it
Hmm.
ever being brought back up to the Intercontinental title. I remember being held by your Tito Santanas and your
Yeah.
Stone Colds and your Don Moroccos and guys, Jimmy Snuka.
Morocco.
Like,
Yeah.
I mean, that was some great Intercontinental champions. And then it just became one of those things that passed around and didn't mean
Hmm.
anything. Gunther's made it mean something. So that
Yes.
was going to be my call out because I never liked the fact that the longest reigning Intercontinental champion in history was a comic book character from the awful 90s period, pre-attitude period of WWE, where everyone was a occupation, and Honky Tonk Man was an Elvis impersonator, and that's your longest reigning Intercontinental champion. It sounds much cooler to say that Gunther is the longest reigning IC champ in history. So
Yep.
good on him.
Absolutely. And, that is something that I think we can credit to Triple H, because Triple H really likes those like old school, like long title reigns,
Yeah,
and
and I love him for it.
I'm glad that that's something that Vince hasn't tried to gobble up and get. I do. Good job, Trips. Good job, Gunther. Yeah, absolutely. I'm down with
But
that.
then I was going to have that as my performer of the week, and then I watched SmackDown, and The Rock shows up. The Rock shows up and doesn't just show up. I mean, it was unexpected. It's not WrestleMania season. I know the writer strike's going on and all, but he came. He elevated everything that he participated in. He was the Rock that the fans wanted, with the lines that still came across as crisp and cool. He elevated Austin Theory in that exchange by just being in the ring with him. There was backstage moments where, you got a star-laden SmackDown where there's John Cena and The Rock face to face in 2023. It was just cool, man. And The Rock still still brought that cool factor with him, and it paid off for WWE. It was the most viral moment in SmackDown history. Like a million and some folks have been
Oh yeah.
watching the clips of that. So
Yeah, I was one of
whatever
those
they were
people.
trying, yeah, man, it was good. I don't care where it leads, and I'm of course hopeful is where it might lead. That maybe that all we thought was off the table might not be off the table. I think that would be cool to see. But even if it was a one night only thing, The Rock returning to SmackDown, his show. And getting a whole chance going, getting a chant going that could barely be aired on television for a good 5 minutes was just great entertainment.
So I saw this clip on YouTube. I think it was on like the WWE YouTube channel where they show that in its entirety. And I mean, he brings that so much energy, and you can see the crowd reactions. It's like nobody expected that, which was great. I hate that it's taken a writer's strike to get Cena and The Rock to, make some appearances. I mean, Cena's got a little bit more of a long-term thing. We don't know what's going on with The Rock yet. I guess really it's contingent upon how long this writer's strike goes, because
And
Cena
how
and Rock
good that pop made him feel, because he has talked
right,
about it since, about how
right.
it's been a long time since he felt that and how good it felt. He's been really happy post event with how everything came across. I'm hoping that gives him the itch to just do a little more for WWE, because I think it could be really interesting, and maybe put some more interest back on Roman for a little while. We got to do something to keep things interesting until Mania and what is ever next for Roman, because he's sort of taking a back seat.
Yeah, and it seems like, the hottest wrestling angle in ages has just kind of fizzled recently. It's like they just kind of dead ended it and don't know where to go with it now.
Yeah.
But
So this could be the answer.
this could absolutely be the answer, and I'm all for that.
All
Totally
for
for that.
Doug, I don't know. Match of the week may be the same because of your illness. If you managed to catch any matches from last week that you
Man,
want
I
to,
literally, just highlights all week here and there, in between, in between meetings, in between naps when I was sick.
I would say then, for the people at home and for you, if you see a match from last week, good options are out there. But I'm going with, again, sort of that surprise in that, yes, we see it more often on NXT than we used to, but it's still kind of cool when a main roster talent comes down
Oh,
and
okay.
intermingles. But Becky Lynch and Tiffany Stratton on NXT last week. Yes, it's another main roster person like Dirty Dom, who now has holding an NXT title, but it's obvious why they do this, and it
Hmm.
makes sense why they do this. We
Absolutely.
need we need eyes on a product that doesn't have a lot of marquee stars yet, and we need these young talents who aren't on the road or doing anything, learning from the veterans that come down and work with them. I've liked Tiffany Stratton. I didn't know she could work like that. Obviously, she's in the ring with someone who is going
Right.
to
Yeah.
elevate her, and that means it worked. The fans got an entertaining match. They got a surprise. They got to see Becky Lynch in an
Right.
old, small, and kind of intimate environment, and they got to see her have a heck of a contest with a person who I would argue, even though she lost her NXT Women's Championship, she gained a whole lot more from losing to Becky Lynch than she would have just having a normal NXT title reign that maybe fewer people would have seen.
And Becky Lynch didn't have to river dance to the ring this time. So, that's right. All you OG black and gold know what I'm talking about.
That's right. That's right. She got to walk out there like the man and put on a show. And put on a show they did. I definitely think that that's
Oh,
a
I have to
match
see
that should
that.
be,
Yeah.
yeah, should be watched. And Doug, with that, it comes to an end of another Two Bros Wrestling show. You've seen on there on the scroll our upcoming schedule. We're back on air live at our
Okay.
normal day and time on Sunday, where we are going to give you not one, no, Doug, we're giving them two. We could have given them three pay-per-view previews, because we're going to start off October hot. 2 straight weeks of pay-per-views, including AEW's Wrestle Dream in the first weekend of October, and that's followed up by WWE's Fastlane, as well as the next NXT pay-per-view that same weekend. We are
Wow.
going to preview the two main shows, though. Everything we know about Wrestle Dream, it'll be just a week out, so we should be able to give you a full preview for that. And for whatever matches they've announced for Fastlane, we'll go over those as well in a 2-for-1.
Like it.
Like it, and hopefully you like it. Give us a like, give us a follow, give us some
Oh,
comments.
nice
Let
segue.
us know what you think about this night's show, what you think the AEW contracts for the elite mean, what it would have meant had they gone to WWE. Would you have rather have seen that? Let us know what you think, and then join us again on Sunday where we'll all talk upcoming pay-per-view events.
Let's do it. Until then, don't do what I've been doing. You guys go watch some wrestling.
Stay well. See you on Sunday.
Good night, everybody. Thanks for watching.